Honor the warrior.
Honor the warrior. Honor the warrior.
Honor the warrior.
Honor the warrior. Honor the warrior.
Honor the warrior.
Honor the warrior. Honor the warrior.
My brothers and sisters, let's get down to business. I am called Doshanko, otherwise known as He at the Beginning, or the topic of this video, and welcome to my temple. As you've seen in the title, I normally refer to myself as this enigmatic alias known as He at the Beginning, which sparked a decent bit of questions from my subscribers and friends, like what is that name? Where did it come from? I mean, it's corny to call yourself a certain nickname without context, and even with context, it's still corny. But in my case, the context is rather expansive, but to clarify how this name came to be, let me dive into those murky waters with you. As you guys know, or likely came across my channel for the first time, I am a published author and creator of the Child with a Dragon's Heart novel series. And before I talk about the story itself, I wanted to discuss preliminaries. When I wanted to write my book, I wanted to assume a character role in the story, but I am not the main character of my own story, and it exists in a fictional universe, one that is not named in the franchise until much later on. I think back to Marvel Comics. It contained a character called the One Above All, who stands above all cosmic threats, powers, you name it. Essentially the archetypical god figure throughout its narrative. Now, it's ingrained in human instinct that creation is one of the most potent avenues to be in touch with our sense of spirituality. When a child is born, a pre-existing soul is housed within the vessel, the body, so that when it exits the womb, a new being will emerge. And when you create art, we assume a patriarchal or matriarchal relationship with our pieces. You know, we feel we are imprinting ourselves onto whatever canvas or surface that lies in front of us. There's a sense of divinity in us, because oftentimes our art can be distributed and discussed. Devoid of bloodline, even though our lives may end short, art immortalized our impacts upon the world. They illustrate how our time differs from those who will come after us. When I was younger, actually, my family was big into Christianity, and if yours were as well, you would likely know where I'm about to go with this. The singular God that is often worshipped goes by many names, known to be the creator of everything, of everyone, that all things are made in his image. It's very interesting that they call him, God, or I should say if they call God a him. For all we know, God is more so a what. We never know. Imagine if God had a penis, huh? No, but we never know what God really is or what God really wants. We have our Bibles, which try to make sense of him, which I actually encourage curious listeners to read, not because everything in there is true, because a lot of it isn't, but humanity's attempts to understand the intangible, the infinite, and the invisible. It shows that they're capable of breeding imagination and interpretation. Those two things come into the fold, they lay the foundations for civilizations and philosophies to expand. Also, in my story, I sought after this role, to assume the godly role, but to add to a different spin on it, Without revealing too much detail to my audience, I will try to be as concise as I can. The premise of my story entails an ancient prophecy. Notice that right away, a lot of tales that encompass the divine begins with a prophecy. And prophecies are often made to prevent something from happening, as well as achieving something often beyond what humans are capable to pursue, of their own merits. And I will allude to Christianity here. The origin story from my fictional universe mentions three figures, one representing light, one representing shadow, and the mediator who balances the two. It resembles the ensemble of angels, demons, and then God who stands above them both. You're likely aware of the head of the demonic empire called Satan or the devil or Lucifer, but here's the spin. In my narrative, I am the single being, the only consciousness, and I decided to splinter my essence into light, shadow, and balance. But that's not all. Oftentimes in literature, the God figure is supposed to be rather indifferent, not truly trying to intervene in most affairs. The previous three beings are merely avatars for my vision. I assume the role as an unconscious creator and an oracle. When I mentioned that art often sparks the divine, dreams also are a deep representation of our mind's journeys into the unknown. In fact, the basis for my power system began with dreams. My power system is called aura, and like each aura that is utilized are called presences. And the very first aura to exist is also based off of the imagination and power of dreams. Everything in my story is created from my dreams, my vision. But I implement proxies, avatars that play out my will and turn those dreams into reality. When everything is forged, what is left of the creator? People wonder, but to be honest with you, I can't spoil that quite yet. But the consciousness still looms throughout all time and space, and the story will tell. But one thing is for certain, when I assume the God role, I'm not placing myself to be the perfect being. In fact, I believe a true God would believe itself to be flawed. If everything that exists is an extension, extension. I can't even say this fucking word, extension of the creator, fucking hell. Even if we make our own choices, whether benign or malign, the possibility for either, represents a complex hive from the creator's design. Presuming that creator to be all good while a force based on his design acts against him does not mean he is blameless. If you have a child and you kill someone, people will look at two things: how the child was raised and why the child would make such a decision to harm others. And if that child was raised well and still chooses to be a monster, guess what? Yes, it's the child's fault, but it's also the parent who is still inherently responsible, because if that child did not exist, the world would have one less killer to worry about. Of course, the parent will not likely be blamed in that circumstance. But if the child was raised horribly by their parents and becomes a killer, those parents are equally guilty. And when it comes to the devil and God, the common narrative interpretation is that God is blameless. And while I can see through the lens of two perspectives, the blameless God one never sat quite right with me. That isn't to say I support the devil or that we should not have children, but I view through the lens that if you create proxies capable of good and evil, no matter what their choices are, you are responsible for them to some extent. Those proxies are a part of your legacy. That legacy sticks with you forever. And the fact that these proxies can make their own choices according to your design, it's like you're trying to build the perfect robots, but when they malfunction, all hell breaks loose. Of course, humanity and life itself is much more complicated. But this is how I want my readers to view He of the Beginning. I also wanted to talk about the argument of whether there is free will or not. And it's a very frustrating topic because there's evidence to support both claims. Free will is hardwired inside of us, at least that's what everybody believes. But if you make this an absolute, then the concept of free will has very dangerous interpretations. I never thought I would bring up this example, but fuck it. Once upon a time, I read upon the case of Mr. Oft, who was at the age of 40 in 2001. He was using children as an inappropriate medium for quote-unquote excitement. And after fighting imprisonment and after being rushed into the hospital, medical professionals had studied that he possessed an orbitofrontal brain tumor located in the sections of the brain associated with impulse control issues and antisocial conduct. Once the tumor was removed, he no longer had leanings towards the pursuit of children, but when that tumor regrown, so did his lost lust for the youth. But despite that correlation, there's no simple explanation for that experience. It only leads me to question the concept of free will. Does it truly exist, or does our brain dictate our nature? It takes me back to the philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer when he says a man can do what he wants but cannot will what he wants, or something like that. Our likes and dislikes, our responses to adversity, are those things, truly up to free will, or is it a set of stimuli that we receive in our brain to make a certain choice based upon our experiences? I want to say that I lean towards the latter. But there are cases when people who are aware of their toxic behaviors are able to make decisions that show an inherent betterness against their own nature. I think the existence of self-awareness is good enough proof of evidence if you want to believe in free will, because when we make a choice without a second thought, there is no self-reflection, little room for growth, but when there is hesitation, when there are thoughts behind it, even if our brain can crave for one thing, we are still choosing better. The reason I got into the topic of free will is that He of the Beginning, everything that happens is the account of His dreams and visions that He unconsciously creates. We never willingly have dreams. I put emphasis on the unconsciously part because it's not a grand plan of His, nor is it really His choice to have created everything in the story in a narrative sense. He is still utterly responsible. And what's worse is the only things that He is able to change despite His incredible yet slumbering energy is Himself. Only He can act differently according to His nature if given enough introspection. He doesn't interfere with the events in the story on a whim, nor can He take back a dream once He has one, nor can He change the details of His dreams to change a narrative. So once He has a dream, every being has to act in accordance to that dream, whether they know it or not. This is not truly free will. This is an unconscious manipulation of sentience, and if this is what God represents, then in the context of this story, this God is flawed. But within this power, or I should say within his power, lies a source of energy for beings to enforce their desired outcomes upon their environment, even if they should, under no circumstance, normally be able to overcome that obstacle. But this is only allowed if said outcome is inconsequential to he of the beginning's dreams. Meaning, if it doesn't affect the plot much, such changes can be permitted, but very few are actually able to access this power, and which is a good thing. If everybody had this power, we would all be casually getting life wiped by sickos. It should be said that he of the beginning has, access to this power, but yet refuses to use it. Why does he do that, though? It's like the common question: if God is all-powerful, then why can't he change certain things in a dire time of need? Why doesn't he save children? Why doesn't he answer our prayers? These questions come up a lot. But I think these questions are based off the assumption of what God is versus what God actually is. In my narrative, he of the beginning is essentially everything, and he doesn't even have a responsibility, no inherent purpose on his own. Every one of his dreams and actions are not necessarily choices, but part of a natural process. He splintered himself to become a reality, so to keep himself going, he self-sustains with his proxies. The power to override fate itself in this universe isn't an absolute if it contradicts his dreams. He of the beginning will not allow it. Ooh boy. And the more I think about this, the more it makes sense that he low-key makes him the main the antagonist of the story. Because if beings want to change their lives and their fates, have a better world, and if their contributions made by them can only be surface level change, while his dreams reign supreme, that comes into conflict with everybody. This character is not evil or good. He of the beginning is the indifferent, the neutral party. All of life's joys and beauty, yes, he is responsible for, even though it wasn't his choice to make it so. That means every sin, every atrocity exists because of him too. Now, this isn't to be mistaken for my story's main villain, which is the shadow avatar from He of the Beginning splintering. But because of He of the Beginning creating him, in a way, He of the Beginning is responsible for all of the evil that the shadow creates. Essentially, the story revolves around a god at war with different pieces of himself. And I must admit, that does make the story a bit more interesting. Sorry to make a long story out of this. I wanted He of the Beginning to be a god capable of accountability, of relativity, but also blatant objectivity. Even though I am the creator of everything in this story, as He of the Beginning, I am not allied with the main character. I created the prophecy through my dreams. Everything that plays out, while my proxies can create dire situations, I am still the one ultimately responsible for them. And yes, I am able to watch the events unfold out of sight and out of reach from everyone, but once I make a decision, I cannot take back a decision. I want my limitations to emulate human limitations, at least on a correlation and causality scale. That's who He of the Beginning is, and this is just an explanation without me revealing my story's plot, so in the far distant future I will make another video explaining He of the Beginning's in-depth role with the plot details attached. But that likely won't be made until 25 years later. I'm serious. I don't like spoilers, and if a unique circumstance occurs where I don't have the time to write my stories anymore, I will ensure that my stories will be told in a faster pace. Perhaps I should release a new book every 6 months to counteract that. Who knows? So don't wait for that video. Let all my proxies and stories play out so that when the video is made, you guys will be able to understand. Lord willing, if we're still going to be around at that time. And make sure to comment, like, and subscribe to my channel. Also, if you want to support me on Amazon or you want to know a little bit more about me as an author, go to this link down below. I have 2 separate links, one directing to my books and one directing to my bio. Please check it out, and as always, face the mountain.